Hey guys, welcome back to the CARF L-39 Skygate build video series. If you guys have any questions, comments, make sure you list them below. I'll do my best to answer them. Also, if you have not subscribed to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below. When you hit the subscribe button, also hit the bell and you'll be notified of new videos from this build. Also, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, and thanks so much for tuning in. Okay guys, the next step in the manual is the speed brake section. Now because I'm waiting for some things to dry on the fuselage, I'm going to skip one step forward and go to the turbine and thrust tube section. So what I'm going to do is complete the, I guess not really a bypass, but the cone assembly with the wood structure that gets glued onto it. So that's what we're doing now. Okay, so basically in the manual, it's pretty straightforward. We've got these 4 of these wood pieces. Because this ducting is getting cut off, I just snapped the pieces off these wood pieces because you don't need them. They come over here and it's going to get all cut off in this area anyways. So just snapped them off to make it easier. And what the manual says is you want to sand these areas that are going to be touching the angled part of the carbon, which I've done. I needed to do it on the left-hand side. I didn't need to do it on the right-hand side. So I also had to do a little bit of sanding here to allow the wood piece to go further this direction. So I sanded, just a shave, just a touch off there. So we've got our 2 pieces that are fitting on there first, and then you add another layer that goes over top. So we're going to high sol that all together and clamp it all together to let it cure. Now I have sanded the area where the wood's going to get glued to the carbon, and that is basically our next step. So I've got my high sol there, and this is something I guess I take these things for granted, guys, but you know, you don't need to use the mixing nozzles for high sol. You can just put it on something to mix it on. And I use my trusty, I can't remember if I've talked about this in the video already with the high sol, but my trusty bent screwdriver, mix it all up, and then just apply it with the screwdriver. It works really, really good. So that's what we're doing right now. I will set the camera up and maybe get some of this on video. Okay, so we're mixing the high sol. That's going to get all ready here. Okay, so that's all good. And let's carry on with the mounting of these pieces of wood. So now you want to make sure you have a decent amount of clamps hanging by. A bunch of these small ones we'll use. And maybe some of these really small ones to clamp the 2 pieces of wood together. Okay, so step number 1, putting this piece on. That's going to be mounting to the carbon section. We only need to come this far. I really don't need any high sol in the front section there because it's going to be, again, cut off about here. So I'll put the high sol on there. Okay, so see how that looks. We also need to get some on this piece right here where it touches the inside of the bell mouth. So we'll put that on there. We'll probably have to add some more afterwards. Okay, so we got some on there. See how this looks. Alright, I'd say that's pretty stinking good. I'll show you inside there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is add another layer of high sol, put this guy on top, and clamp it all together. And if I need to mix some more high sol, that's what I will do. We'll go with this step first. Now because these parts fit very, very snug together, we really don't need a lot of excess in this wood to wood area. Otherwise it's just going to come oozing out. But we want to make sure it's nice and solid when it's all glued together. Okay, so put that guy on. Okay, so these are lined up nicely, so I'm going to clamp these together first. Because it's lined up really well. Okay, and then we're going to clamp this section. I don't know if you guys can see this because I can't see in the camera. I'm going to clamp this section down to the carbon piece, and then we may go in and fill that with high sol in a minute. We'll see how it works out. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Definitely happy with the results there. And I think what I'm going to do is just go in and fill the area beside the wood structure there, just to make it nice and solid and full. I think I will get a glove on. And do this way. Okay, so that is that. Happy with that, looks good. And pieces are mated together really, really nice. And it's nice and solid. I'm probably just gonna do a little more cleanup before I go to the other side. And I'll probably put one more clamp there as well. There, so happy with that, guys. Now I'm going to work on the other side. I have to mix a little bit more high sol first here because I don't have enough. Okay, overall I'm happy with that. Okay guys, just some progress updates here. The lens cover's installed, and I used shoe goop to adhere it in place. So that is done. Looks really good. Happy with the finished result. The doors are finished as far as the servo mounting is concerned. I need to work out the horns for both sides, but anyways, the servos are in place, which is awesome, and that's finished. What else? The bypass, or the carbon cone, that's done. I just pulled the clamps off, did a little bit of scraping to get some of the excess high sol off, but that's all finished. A lot more solid now, of course, because of those beams that are attached essentially. So that's done, and that is basically it. So you can see in the manual here, talks about cutting the bypass at the front, just to make the flow of air around the turbine more even. So we'll do that at some point as well too. I'm not sure if we're ready to install the pipe yet. Maybe that's what we'll move to next. But we can also get started on the speed brake as well too. I think we're probably going to do that next. And that makes the most sense. So basically the first step with the speed brake that's written in the manual is you got to cut out the areas of the fuselage that get replaced with the speed brake doors. So these are very, very well marked on the underside of the fuselage. It should be fairly easy to cut out. But that's basically the first step in the speed brake section. Okay guys, I was just going to get started on the speed brake installation, and we've got a problem that I didn't really think about before. So problem number one is the fairings, which came painted, are actually painted backwards. So they painted them to install this way, which is fine. The problem is that there's the cutout right here, okay, which needs to go to the back because the speed brake, which comes in and out, this is the piece that lines up with the speed brake. So this is actually the way that the fairings are supposed to be installed. So the yellow's painted backwards. That's problem number one. Problem number two, which is fairly obvious, which I didn't think about before, is the actual speed brakes themselves are not painted with the yellow. So we could install these and there'd be a massive amount of the L missing and a little bit of the T there. So that's, I guess, an option, is we could install them and have that big gray area, which I don't really like. I could paint them myself, which I don't have the exact yellow, and I mean, in my opinion, it's not the best option. And then I guess we could install these pieces, but again, they're backwards. So not really sure what's going to happen. So I've sent a picture off to the owner of the plane. They're going to contact CARF and find out what they're going to do. Ideally, what would I like to see happen? I'd like to see these pieces reshipped, properly painted. I don't really want them to just send us paint for me to paint it. Not a big fan of that option. I guess it's an option if they do that, but that's where we're at for the air brake. So I guess the air brake's on hold right now. I could cut out the area in the fuselage. Don't really want to do that though, just in case we leave it the way it is, but I think we're going to go forward with the air brake installation. But anyways, that is where we're at right now, guys. Yeah, not entirely sure what's going to happen with the air brake, but that's what's currently happening with the air brake. Okay, and the next step, what I did with the engine mounting assembly is I mounted it to the pipe. Now, just after I did these nuts up, I probably should have cut this first, just thinking about that, but that's okay. It won't be too bad to cut it. I'm just going to mark it from the other side and probably use a hacksaw to cut it. That should be the cleanest way to do it. But so the cone is mounted now firmly with at 4 points like it's suggested in the manual. I did have to do a little bit of sanding on the carbon itself. It wouldn't fit inside the metal pipe without doing that sanding, and they do mention that in the manual. All I did was just had a vacuum sitting here right at the point where I was sanding it, and just took my my carbide Dremel bit and just ran it along the perimeter in sections at a time, and that worked really well. Generally what you'll find with the carbon piece is where they join it here on the sides, the top and the bottom, that was the thickest portion. So it was basically thick in between about that section for about 2 to 3 inches, and the rest was fairly thin. So most of the sanding, give you a better perspective here, most of the sanding needed to happen on the sides, this side, and the other side, the match to it. So, but that's it. It's done. Once I had enough sanded, it went in nice and easy. And how I did that was I just stood it up like that, Made sure the whole carbon assembly was pushed in, and visually it looked nice and straight, but basically it was pushed in and firm all the way. There wasn't any movement with it. Drilled one hole to the right size, put the bolt with a washer through, tightened up the nut with the washer, and then I moved on to the next one. So I did one at a time, and it worked really well. So that is the exhaust pipe assembly, and we still need to cut this though. Okay guys, we've enlisted Kaya's help because Mom's sleeping. So what I've done is I've marked this, the bypass, where we need to cut it. The manual talks about the location roughly being on the 4th hole, which would be right there, and that's what it shows in the manual. So fairly straightforward. How I marked this was I put masking tape on there, took my paint marker, which is here, and then just marked it out. So what I'm going to do is get Kaya to hold this, and I'm going to cut it with a hacksaw. Hopefully that works well, and I'll show you guys the final product. Okay guys, that's all cut. Actually worked very, very well. I just used the hacksaw, finished it off with the Dremel and the fiber disc blade on the ends, and worked really well. So this is the engine that's going in this plane. It's a Jet Central Mammoth 250. Big engine for this plane. Most guys are flying this, I know, down at sea level with a 160 or 180. That's what it says in the manual. There's some guys in Eastern Canada that have flown this with a 220, and I think this engine is going to be ideal. Keep in mind that we're about 3,000 feet above sea level, so we do get less thrust from our engine. So I just want to get this kind of initially lined up. The engine's, the little bolts here are actually too wide to fit in between the wood formers. So it's not going to sit perfectly right now, but I just want to check length and positioning with this. So if we go from the nose cone or from the tail cone, we are sitting at, and this of course isn't taking into account the exact measurement because there's the piece of the ruler that's past the measuring line. But basically what we're sitting at from the end of the ruler, we're at 108 millimeters to that clamp. And the reason I'm doing that is because it makes it really hard right now, without taking this all apart, to see how much space we have between the tailpipe and the cone of the engine. So essentially what's happening here is we've overlapped the carbon. I'll mark this out with a Sharpie. So we've overlapped this carbon by about 1 centimeter, so we're sitting about there. Is where the I guess the metal and carbon join together. So we need approximately 1 inch from the entrance to the pipe to the tip of the tail cone. So that's where we're measured to, and I will mark that as well. Okay, so you can see our mark there. So basically that's essentially where we want the tailpipe of the turbine to start. So, and you guys that have done this before, it's pretty straightforward, but that's trying to give a good visual here. That's essentially how close we want the turbine to sit. So our measurement from here to here, the clamp, is 108 millimeters. Right, so I'm just getting this kind of visually lined up here. So 108 millimeters is roughly, that's about the right spot for it. So 108 millimeters, we're almost just past the entrance of the carbon, right? If we're going to kind of take a guesstimate on the mark. So we'll do the same thing on this direction, just to make sure this is all square. I guess we'll do it like this. So we'll get that lined up with the mark, and 108 millimeters is same spot, so just on the entrance of the carbon. The carbon is about 115 millimeters, and we need to go about 7 back from that is 108. So what that'll look like with this engine installed then is we are sitting roughly like that. And that's going to give us the proper spacing. So right now, with the engine positioned right there, our tail cone should be sitting right at that mark, and the entrance to the pipe is 1 inch further. And I don't know if we'll be able to see anything in here, but that's kind of what we're after. Hard to catch on camera, but looks really close. So that gives us our position for the engine. Now what I'll do, because we have to get rid of a little bit of this wood here, I'm going to just make some marks on the former here, just so we have an idea of where we need to remove material for those bolts. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is take my Dremel with that carbide bit and just make a little indent there. What that indent's for is the nuts sitting right there. The wood comes about halfway onto the nut, right? So we need to make a little channel for the nuts to sit into. Okay guys, I've got the little channels sanded out there, and everything looks really good. So that's where the engine's basically going to sit inside of the airframe. Pipe position, not sure yet, but if it's coming all the way to the front, that's where it's going to sit. Now, one thing that I'm not really concerned with, but we'll have to make sure there's no interference. I don't think there should be, but those fuel inputs and starting fuel inputs come straight out of the engine, so we'll have to cut some holes in the carbon pipe there, and the line's going to come out and then have to bend forward, and we'll come through the former work somewhere here. But based on, I don't think the gear is going to be that close anyway, so we should be good there. So that's the engine kind of temporarily mounted. I like the way this is set up, because you can get the engine all nicely centered, and the pipe's not even installed yet, so definitely a nice way to do it. But if you can see there, I don't know how it's going to show up on the camera, but the engine is very well centered inside that pipe. Perfect distance around the entire engine, and obviously the cone looks like it's great as far as being centered. So yeah, very impressed with that. Happy with the way that all worked out.